Hey, folks, I'm talking about the upcoming Jupiter Saturn conjunction in Capricorn that's happening on the solstice on December 21st. And it's a once in almost a millennia event um, for several reasons. Now, you might say, well, Jupiter and Saturn come together every 20 years in the sky, what's called on the ecliptic longitude, which means they pass each other. Jupiter will pass. They don't pass each other. Jupiter passes Saturn in the sky every 20 years. And so what's so significant about this one? So I'm going to talk about that, and I'm going to also explain exactly why it's different than it was, or why the last time it came this close was about 800 years ago, because I hear people thinking that it's this unusual because they're closer to Earth and all this, that the passage isn't as close as it's been for 800 years, and some significance of that, especially historical significance. So I'm going to talk about those things. I'm also, of course, going to talk about the nature of Jupiter, the nature of Saturn, and in Capricorn, etc. But I also, before I get to that, I do want to let people know about this free class that I have. And I've been talking about this lately because, again, Jupiter is now in Capricorn. It's going to be there for the next several months. And this is a recurrence transit, which means it went through Capricorn and joined Saturn at the beginning of 2020, at the end of March. From the end of March until the end of June 2020, Jupiter already went into Capricorn. This was at the height of when we were dealing with COVID, and we had already been locked down for a few weeks, maybe even about a month in some parts of the world. And we started to see the effects. We started to notice, oh wow, look at what happens when we're all locked away. Nature starts to rejuvenate, and we started to get a sense of, there are great lessons that are being taught now. It's not just trying to survive this, and it's this horrible, terrible thing, and so triggered and paranoid. So there's, wherever Jupiter is, there's always hope. There's always some optimism, regardless of where it is. And so this is a recurrence transit of that, where we're trying to find the sense of meaning and purpose in something that's difficult and stressful. And so Jupiter's going to be going through that section of the sky. He'll go straight through Capricorn now. He won't go retrograde back into it through like April of next year of 2021. So it's really important for you to get your head around what this Jupiter in Capricorn is about. And on this web class, again, I'm going to explain. It's totally free. If you go there and you click that link and you click yes, reserve my seat, there's a pop down, and you can either watch a replay right now, or you can reserve a time to just sit and watch it as a dedicated time and space, so you can really concentrate on it, because it's a long class. It's about an hour. It's a little more than an hour, but you'll learn how this transit of Jupiter through Capricorn will affect you based on your sign, based on your rising sign. Also, I'll talk about Jupiter in Capricorn through the different nakshatras, because it's different if it's in Uttarashada, if it's in Shravana, if it's in Dhanishta. Also talk about the history of Jupiter in Capricorn. I'm going to do some of it today, at least, from this previous time when they became, when they passed really close. And but again, I'm going to talk about the COVID, the recent transit of Jupiter through Capricorn and its relationship to COVID. Also some remedies, ways to get through this, because look at the intense time that we're in right now. And we're all trying to find the meaning and the purpose and the hope in the intensity and severity of the times that we've just gone through, which is, Jupiter just went through Sagittarius. Now it's in Capricorn, and we have to reckon with where we are in our life and in our world. So again, you can go there. It's free, and check that out. So this is where we're at right now. This is a portrait of the sky on the solstice, 1221. You see over here on the side, I have two dates from 1225 and 1227 that were very pivotal in the history of the world, so to speak. So again, this isn't just, you're like, well, 1225, 1227. The last time Jupiter and Saturn came this close, I'm going to explain the exact conjunction, was in 1226. Okay. And again, a couple things of global significance happened at that time. Again, one, the Magna Carta was redesigned and modernized and updated in England. The Magna Carta is like is sort of the prototype of Western law. The U.S. Constitution and our system of government and the principles of law were derived from the Magna Carta, actually, which, again, this was 800 years ago. And also, Genghis Khan died in 1227, so right after the Great Conjunction. This was probably the most significant sort of global event that was happening at the time. Genghis Khan, captured most of the free world at that time through Europe, and he even went through Asia, what is now China, all the way to the Korean Peninsula, down through China and Mongolia, and even down into Persia and parts of India, and even pushed into Europe. After he died, his son, continued, but he died shortly after. So it just coincides with both the rule of law and this sort of conquest. And again, I'm going to get into the specifics of Jupiter and Saturn and Capricorn and how you can see these sort of parallel courses even in this world right now. And again, I'm also talking about this in the context of what we're hearing now, what's talked about now quite a lot as the Great Reset, and there's so much triggering and paranoia, frankly, just to say it, and resetting. There's a great reset going on. By the way, these kinds of resets always happen. These kinds of if you want to call them resets, again, this is just a term that's been used now, and we all have access to it. But these kinds of resets are always going, are ongoing, meaning, as long as we've had any kind of travel and the ability of nations to influence each other and the world to influence each other, cultures get reset. We have a technological reset, a overturning of existing paradigm all the time. It happens all the time. So again, if you've not been watching, it happens constantly. We had a great reset with the information age, right? That was a great reset. World's very different than it was even 20 years ago, the last time Jupiter Saturn came together, which was in 2000. They came together in Taurus. Again, it doesn't mean that these great resets coincide with Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions. All I'm saying is we have this whole kind of paranoia now around this current great reset because we're living in an age of sort of heightened awareness and paranoia about certain things, which, by the way, is also nothing new. Every time technology resets and every time we go through these New World Order. They say, George Bush talked about it 20 years ago. Right. He called it a New World Order. This was in 1990, in the late 80s. So they imagined a reset. And it's always, referred to in utopic terms. There's always a balancing act between some benefit and some detriment, because we live in this world where power is exploited. We often we always have to be careful of the exploitive qualities of these resets, etc. But they're always happening. Right now, they're happening on another level, in conjunction with the technology and in conjunction with the times. And yes, in conjunction with the capacity for those who are powerful to grab more power for themselves. Again, I'm not minimizing it, but I'm also not saying it like, okay, here it is. Now it's the end of the world. It's always been said to be the end of the world. It's always terrified people. The Industrial Revolution in the 1800s was a great reset, and it was terrifying then, and it had its problems, obviously, that needed to be corrected. And so this whole idea is really nothing new. It's just this current version of it. So again, I don't want to get. I'm going to do more. I'm going to talk more about that in. I'll talk a little bit more about it here, but also in upcoming videos. But as it stands now, even with these things, there is a great opportunity and a need to reset a lot of things. By the way, if you go back and listen to things I said last year with Saturn going into Capricorn, especially crossing over the planet Pluto, which shows a lot of social transformation, and this dance with Jupiter over the next year or so, like I talked about last year, I said then we were having a great, I didn't call it a great reset, but I said a recalibration of like our monetary systems and our relationship with nature and our relationships with again, food and resources and all of that. I didn't call it the Great Reset at the time. I don't know, maybe the term had been floated around, but I said we were going through what amounts to a Great Reset, and we don't have any choice. I said it then because we have been raping, just to use an appropriate word, the earth, the sky, animals, nature, everything now for hundreds of years. But now it's reaching a point where we have so many people and so much capacity to simply, to destroy because of technology at a rate that's much more alarming than ever before. So that sort of collision of our technological capacity, its capacity to damage ecosystems and whatnot. This is the reason we have these viruses released when we disrupt ecosystems and take an animal from one, bring it into another environment where the people don't have any immunity. Then you're going to release pathogens that now, again, there's no natural immunity to it. Just like when the settlers from Europe came over to the New World in America, the Indians, or I should say the Native Americans, the native people were acclimated to their environment. The viruses and the diseases that they had were congruent to the environment where they lived. But now you introduce all these people from another part of the world who have all kinds of other immunities already built into their genetic structure, and you introduce them in this land and this, to these people that don't have that built up, it's going to just wreak havoc. And all the natives died from like smallpox and plague and all this other stuff spread. It's the same principle. In that sense, this is what really has, given rise to these viruses and these other kinds of things, because now we've kind of released Pandora's box, taken the lid off. We are already globalist, is what I'm saying. And we become more and more globalist all the time. So the globalist solution is to develop solutions on a kind of globalist level. So again, these are kind of great reset sort of ideas of things that are happening. In the process, there's benefit, there's detriment, there's exploitation. That's always been happening. So again, this is all connected to the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction right now that I talked about last year when COVID first started, and what it really meant. I said it then. This isn't good. We're going to be dealing with this for at least a year and a half, probably 2 years. In fact, I kind of got the prediction right when I said we're going to have to. We have an incredibly severe time now from like March until from late February until I said May or June, and then we would start to see things drop. Of course, most of the world, that's exactly what happened. They followed the distancing, the measures, and brought down and flattened the curve, which is the term. In America, we never did it very well for many reasons, mostly because the messages from our leaders was not honest, it wasn't clear, and it was always undermined. Most of the world did flatten the curve, but then we would see a resurgence in the winter, which we now see, and it's coming back now in a time period now where there's COVID fatigue. Now it's been undermined. Now it's mixed with these ideas that it's a hoax. At least this is in the Western world. In Asia, in Taiwan, in South Korea, in many countries, in like, for example, New Zealand, they got COVID under control right away, and they never went through these horrific lockdowns. They went through them early and for a short amount of time, but then because they didn't act like a bunch of lunatics, they got the curve flattened, and and since then, they got good tracing, they got good testing, and they have continued to manage it. So they haven't been and won't be getting as whacked as those in the Western world, which this is a lesson, right? All of our freedoms, quote, so to speak, have a downside in that sense. Again, they have an upside, they have a downside. I try to look, everything is a combination of light and dark, good and bad, you might say. And so now we're seeing this downside in the West, where we've gone through this whole conspiratorial approach to it now. And something like the Great Reset is also part of it, where now COVID has been used to do this and that. And again, I'm not going to get into the merits. You can believe what you want around all of that. But this whole context of the whole system or of the whole issue is a lot of what we're dealing with now. And underneath it all, we're going through this great economic kind of reset with, like I said last year, because Capricorn is about resources, power structures, concentration of power, commitment to the to the path that we're on. And again, we can get into and also it rewards being methodical, taking things seriously, having patience. Patience is one of the big things. Using discrimination. Again, things like lockdowns and whatnot, especially in the West now, we're all triggered. Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. We wouldn't need so much of a lockdown if we had already, again, we're looking at things like lockdowns and how it's destroying the economy and all this. We don't even have any testing, particularly in the US. Our government totally failed. There's no standardized protocols. There's no standardized testing. Because again, in the West, you can't do contact tracing. Westerners would never allow for contact tracing and being spied on through our phones and all these things. Again, this whole kind of thing that we're just so free that we would never agree to that. We can't do that in the West. Okay. Do you really think you're not being spied on and tracked already? You see people even on places like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and all acting like, contact trace, you're going to trace me. You're already being traced. Again, anyway, I just look at the kind of absurdity of it, of now we have these long lockdowns for this thing and we're still being socially distant. We still can't open fully. But this is in the West because we've never actually been able to just say, okay, that's what this thing is. It's not a hoax. We know why we're distancing now because there's asymptomatic spread and a higher lethality rate. We don't know who has it. So I said at the beginning, and I thought we would do this in the West. They did it in Asia. I said, don't worry, we're going to get it under control. The first thing we need to do is get good testing so we know who has it. Again, what happened in Asia that didn't happen here? Well, they got good testing. And then once you know who has it, you can make the person stay home, quarantine. People will voluntarily quarantine once you know who has it. Again, this is the difference between COVID and the cold, is when you don't start spreading the cold until you have symptoms usually. And then you just stay home and the numbers naturally go down. With this, we don't know who has it. That's the problem. So it should have been an all-out war and relentless good testing like they've done in many parts of the world. So then they can keep living their life. And if you test and you get it, you pull yourself out of society and you don't spread it. Again, it's simple. And I had thought and hoped that that's what would happen. like it's happened in South Korea, again, even China, Taiwan, in places where they're used to this. They wear masks. They do this kind of stuff. It's not that new to them. They don't feel like a mask is a social statement. They're being oppressed and they're now being trapped and they're going to be microchipped. And it's just the beginning of turning us into zombies and all kinds of stuff like we did in the West because we weren't used to it. Now it becomes this kind of thing, very ungrounded, instead of being patient, calm, determined. Okay, here's where we're at. Here's what we do. And then we can get through it. Just a couple months of this, perhaps at times. Maybe we'll have to do it again next winter. But let's just get through this, take it seriously, and develop testing and have a strategy. There's no strategy, especially from the president, like in the U.S. Most European countries did it quite well. They got the numbers down and they stayed pretty flat. The US, we never got it down. But then the resurgence started again in Europe. And now you're seeing all of the conspiratorial sort of paranoid approach in Europe as well. So again, this is really something that's just ravaging the Western world because of all of our freedoms, our freedom to express everything, our freedom to just, especially now, become fact-free propaganda machines for nothing. So again, we have a model for what would work and what's still working. Again, so that those are the real Capricorn virtues that were rewarded back then, and I had hoped and thought that's what would happen. And they're still going to be rewarded now. We can still do it. We got another shot, and we got to do it. Again, so now Jupiter's gone back into Capricorn. It's a recurrence from when it happened last year, and we need to find the higher meaning and the purpose here. That's what we're trying to do. Okay, so let me just talk about the reason that we have this conjunction is so different than other Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions. And it's actually related to planetary war, actually, and the computations for planetary war. This is going to be a real planetary war, meaning that I don't mean having war in the United States. I mean an astrological thing where planets get within 1 or 2 degrees of each other, within 1 degree, I should say. Usually when we do planetary war, and let me actually bring this up and show you, make the chart bigger. So again, here's the solstice chart. This is also happening on the winter solstice in the northern hemisphere, southern solstice, the summer solstice in the southern hemisphere. But you can see, like, you have Jupiter 622, Saturn 621 of Capricorn. And again, what this means, just those two numbers means that on the ecliptic longitude, which means how far it's gone on the ecliptic longitude, that's what it is, that they're both at 620 Capricorn. But usually what happens is, even if, like, you could have 2 planets at the same degree of sidereal longitude, but in the sky, you have, let me make it bigger. But in the sky, you might have one here, like, that's the point of one, and another one is up here, right? Like they're if you look in the sky, they're not right next to each other. One is on top of another. And that's because, in fact, it would even be something like this because the ecliptic is tilted. And that's what a conjunction looks like. You're like, how is that a conjunction? They're this far apart. Well, because that's just ecliptic longitude. Ecliptic is where the planets are moving. Longitude is how far they've moved along it. 0 Aries is the beginning of the ecliptic longitude. Ashwini and Aries is 0 ecliptic longitude. And then you go all the way around, right? But the real planetary war is also the ecliptic latitude, which means the height that it is. So it's how high they are in the sky as well. And what's going to be happening on the solstice with Jupiter, Saturn, they're not only the same ecliptic longitude, but ecliptic latitude, which means they're right on top of each other. So when you hear that they're closer than they've been in 800 years, that's the closeness. The closeness to each other in the sky from our point of view. You also want to not lose perspective here, because they're always where they are. All of this is from our vantage point. It's where we are in relation to where they are. Okay? So it means that from where we're standing, they look like they line up. And again, not only at the same ecliptic longitude, but also the latitude. So what happens is that their energy, their rays line up and sort of blur together and mix together, and it looks like one big planet, so to speak. So this was the the principle behind planetary war. This was the principle that they were trying to calculate when they calculated planetary war, and when they discussed it, like in the Surya Siddhanta or whatever. They talk about the planets at the same, within 1 degree of ecliptic longitude and latitude. So when they get there, the reason is then it looks like one big planet. And so this is going to be a true, like, planetary war, a true joining of the planets. And so again, there's principles to see which one wins the planetary war. The other thing to understand is that with any planetary war, anytime planets come together like that, whether it's just based on the ecliptic longitude or the ecliptic latitude, there's going to be 2 winners depending on the day. So when you're looking at it by transit, okay, if you say that the one that's in the highest longitude wins, okay. If you say it's one in the lowest longitude wins, okay. But that's going to change from day to day. If you say that it's the one who is brighter wins, it's a little simpler. One of the rules for planetary war was that the brightest planet wins. Like in this case, it would be Jupiter, because Jupiter is just naturally brighter than Saturn. Its magnitude is higher. That's probably the easiest way to look at it, is that Jupiter wins the planetary war. The other one is actually the one who has the highest latitude wins. There are other indications that the one with the lowest latitude wins because it cuts off the other one. So again, I'm just explaining the principle of this planetary war, and this is an excellent example of what we are, why this is different than the other Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, because they come together every 20 years or so. The last time it was in Taurus around 2020, sidereal Taurus. And so again, now it's Capricorn. And these things I'm talking about these resets and these this recalibration. Again, the last time Jupiter and Saturn had this sort of occultation, which is another way to explain it when 2 planets come together and we're this close. This was when, literally right as the Magna Carta, again, a few years before. You don't have to make it exactly that day. It's not that day. Sometimes we look at astrological events as a day. Some things happen on a day. And if you're looking at something on a day, that's important, the day of an actual event. But then you're looking at things like this, where we've been in a cycle, especially because, as I said, Jupiter popped its head into Capricorn and joined Saturn almost exactly last year. He poked his head up, he went into the sign, then he went retrograde back, and now he's up here again. That's why I'm talking about this recurrence transit related to COVID, because before Jupiter even joined Saturn in Capricorn, I said then that the big thing that's going on right now with this COVID is we are recalibrating our relationship to nature, to money, monetary systems. And again, look at what's happened to our money since then. In the US and around the world, we floated so much fiat capital that we don't know what the hell's going on now. We don't have any money. Frankly, all the trillions of dollars of relief packages and whatnot, something needs to be done about this. And it's not just the US that did it. All countries did it. And our economies are interdependent. Those who want to act like we're not interdependent anymore and that we can just close our eyes and act like our economies aren't linked and we want to go back to some protectionist way of life, I'm sorry, but progress is a real thing. Things are progressing. They're going to keep progressing. And you can't just act like they're not and pretend that you can stop it. Especially, you want the benefits of it, but not the responsibility of it. That's the way it goes. Now, you need to manage this progress. And again, it's always dangerous and perilous, especially with AI and all the stuff that's going on. Don't think I'm not aware of it. Don't think I'm not aware of, the World Health Organization and Gates and all these international foundations and GMO food sources. And I'm aware of all of it. I know all of it. I'm not an expert, but I understand what the dangers are. But our economies are interlinked. We could no longer destroy another big economy without it hurting us now. So again, there's a great benefit to that, coming together as a global community. Again, to many people, realize this is the future and it's our hope, because we need to save the planet. We're destroying the planet. We're not going to do it if one country does it and the other 99 don't. So again, these are the kinds of things that where we're at. We're on the verge of that. We could be terrified, paranoid, triggered, and lose our minds at the possibility, or we can be sober and real and again rise to the moment, which is what Capricorn energy is about and Saturn energy is about, because we're going to have a reset whether we like it or not. It's just, what are we resetting, and are we being sensible? Are we being intelligent? Are we being practical and whatnot about it? That's what Saturn and Capricorn, that's what Jupiter is, even Pluto. That's why I started talking about the fact that Pluto has also gone into Capricorn. Because this is the explosive potential and the issues that we face now. So again, these are the challenges now. And again, Saturn is in Capricorn for a couple years. He's going to be there to early 2023. So he's nowhere near done doing this shift, doing this mature and grown up and adult gaze and look at what we have and setting up that structure that can move things into the next paradigm. Again, the last time it happened, we had two things happening very close simultaneously. The two big things that were going on in the world was, as I said, Genghis Khan, this world conqueror who conquered more land than Alexander. He was maybe the greatest conqueror the world has ever seen, as far as, quote, being successful at it. And he was still alive, and at the height of his conquest, it went on for a few more decades with ensuing family members, but he died shortly after this great conjunction. And in fact, he even referred to it. It was known back then. They were doing astronomy back then. They knew of this even back then. Obviously this is why and how they identified these things, because they were astronomers back then. They could see. And so they were like, oh, it's because not only is Jupiter passing Saturn on the ecliptic, but it's within 1 degree of ecliptic latitude as well. So they almost look like one big star. So but also, again, the Magna Carta, which was a very civilized document, taking civilization and law into the next kind of paradigm, which is where, self-governance and away from the dictums of a authoritarian into the next realm. Now, England was still under the it was still a monarchy and whatnot, like it is now. But the Magna Carta was one of the first documents, if not the first document, at least in modern times. The Greeks had their own kind of similar parliamentary system, but this was the sort of genesis of what we would now call democracy. The Magna Carta was written first about 15 years earlier. I think it was 1215 or something. And it was flat out rejected. It was like too ahead of its time. It had to be revised several times. And it was the revision of 1225, again, a year before this great conjunction, that it started to take hold. and then after that, it started to take hold. So it's the revisions of 1225 that we now would consider to be the modern Magna Carta, similar to like in the U.S. in its founding days, you had the Articles of Confederation, and you had different versions of what became the Constitution and all like that. It was kind of like the earlier versions of the Magna Carta were earlier, but then the one that was really arrived at that we now have as the document, or that is the actual piece that was ratified, was from 1225, which was like the year before the Great Conjunction of 1226. Very similar to, we go back a year, like last year, Jupiter and Saturn got really close to the conjunction. And it was, again, this whole thing with COVID and is a catalyst for us to get serious, to grow up, to stop acting like we can pretend that we're not destroying the planet, or that we're not authoritarians underneath it all, just trying to dominate everybody, dominate each other. One country dominating another one political party dominating another one ideology dominating another one, on whichever spectrum you're talking about. We have this earth, we have each other, we have to learn to get along, learn to be fair with resources, both with each other and in relation to the planet. And again, COVID has been a very clear example. Again, by now we've gone into all kinds of conspiracies that it was actually genetically engineered to be released by China to infect the world so they can win the war. They can do all this stuff to us. Again, even if that is true, it doesn't change the fundamental fact that the genesis of the virus itself is from bats, and from being and from an ecosystem that is not native to our own. And now we have the power to go in and meddle and screw with nature, and we're so out of balance, so out of harmony with the whole, with the whole ecosystem and with Mother Earth and with each other, that this is a symptom of that. I happen to not think that I've looked like everyone has. I follow every conspiracy or whatever it might be. I've looked at the Chinese doctor, I forgot her name, who every scientist or doctor I've seen who've come out and said, no, this is really the way it happened. There are things that are definitely suspect, particularly with like a coronavirus with an HIV spike protein and all that. I've seen all of the stuff. I don't pretend to be a scientist and say, oh no, now I know this is fact. I don't say I know something is fact unless I know it's fact. And I try to look at a larger picture and say, let's say that is fact. Okay, does it change the fundamental fact? Or is it just one more story that we're now triggered by, hypnotized by, and proclaiming as fact, even though we don't know it? And these are the things that to me are more dangerous, is people acting like they know what's factual in regard to these conspiracies, which we don't know if they're true. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying we don't know. And what do we know? That's the more important issue. And what we do know are the things that I'm saying, that we are out of balance with nature. We're out of balance with monetary systems. We're out of balance with the structure of how these things are moving forward. And now is the time to really find that hope in it, as we see a kind of simultaneous sort of conjunction between a Genghis Khan-like energy wanting to dominate the world and a Magna Carta energy of trying to establish a new relationship with law, with fairness, with race, with everything. And we need to we need to be on the right course here. We need to be on the on the progressive side, because things are progressing. They will continue to progress. There's no way to stop it. You're not going to stop progress by saying, okay, progress is bad. It's just a way to, again, spin out on the paranoid AI, microchipping, turn us into zombies, the Matrix, dystopian future. So let's all say, screw the world and run off to the mountains. Again, I'm not saying you can't do it or that there's anything wrong with it, because, hey, I love the mountains. We can all use a detox from technology, but I'm saying that's not going to stop what's going on. Something else might stop it, like the entire ecosystem and financial system and all that sort of collapse. That could do it. And again, there's a lot of things that, that could bring everything to a halt. But as far as a future that we can create, I'm more hopeful than that. And I think we still have plenty of time to create sustainable energy sources, technologies, systems of government that aren't just exploitive. I don't happen to think that every industrialist or every organization is just out to do nothing but, turn people into drones and all that stuff. No, we could have done that a long time ago if we wanted. And yes, businesses exploit all the time for profit and money. Again, these are the things that we really need to look at. Follow the money. Where's the money? And even things like decentralized currencies, again, maybe like Bitcoin or something like that. And all of these future ways of being less controlled by oligarchical structures, whether they're business or political, all this is getting worked through. And this is Saturn in Capricorn, Jupiter, which is finding the meaning and purpose in this. And also Pluto going through Capricorn, again, the whole kind of working through of our monetary systems and the value, because money is not just cash, it's value. It's a value exchange. It's an exchange of values. Money used to be barter. It used to be, I'll do this for you if you'll do this for me. And it was the most immediate form of value exchange that there was, where we're literally exchanging values based on what we can do for each other. It's still there, but now it's been now depersonalized with fiat capital, and banks own the structure and they give us paper or now electronic currency, and we can use that to sustain our life. Again, we're getting further and further away from a hand-to-hand cash. It's becoming more decentralized anyway. Everything is fiat. So again, we're at a precarious place. And I understand and see the danger as well with as technology expands, these resets and these recalibrations become more high stakes. And so but something like COVID, or like something that brings the globe together around, quote, a common enemy, are opportunities for, you might say, a reset, where we come together and share technologies for the betterment of all. That's the rhetoric, that's the hope, and that's the need. Can we do it? I don't know, but that's what the challenge is. And obviously the scary parts is that there are already people at the top of the pyramid. And so the people have to also be sober in their analysis of these things, and not just triggered lunatics, because then the voices of, well, you might say opposition, or what would be reasoned opposition, are then marginalized. See, the thing that bothers me is it seems like that the people who should be offering reasoned opposition, like holistic practitioners and those who are connected more to nature and those who can educate and need to educate about, GMO being exploited by these things in corporate. At this point, so many who could be offering reasoned oppositions are just lunatic conspiracy theorists. They're going off the cliff to the point to where I wish they would just shut up about all this stuff so they can make a difference. Again, we're kind of living in a world where everybody's so triggered that even those who can offer reasoned opposition can be easily dismissed now. Again, it does nothing but benefit someone like Bill Gates and corporatists that if people start voicing reasoned opposition to vaccines and GMO and restrictions because of not getting vaccinated or something, that they can just now marginalize any opposition by going, oh, these are these conspiracy theorists. They're the ones who think that we're all drinking the blood of babies and all this stuff. And they would be completely reasonable to say that, to just dismiss opposition to corporate, international corporate, grabbiness by saying, yeah, these are the people that think Bill Gates is a hellion spawn who is drinking babies' blood and is a reptilian. And most people be like, yeah, that's weird. So yeah, okay, we'll get the vax. We'll agree to the GMO agreements. We'll agree to AI exploitation. So this is the problem, even when reasoned opposition become paranoid lunatics. Sorry, but if you're a paranoid lunatic, I'm talking to you. Cut it out. Especially if you're an authentic holistic practitioner, get grounded again, okay? Take some breaths, get grounded, and stop hurting your own cause to the people that would be receptive to hearing it. Because no one wants to be mandatory vaccinations and depersonalized technologies lording over us like that. No one wants it. So, but the voice of reason has to be reasonable. And again, to my dismay, I've seen so many in the holistic community now have lost their minds in this conspirituality thinking, which is not helping anything. So again, that's my view of it. And, I'm kind of I see the benefits and detriments to all of it. I see how all of it can be beneficial, and we need to share technologies. We need to share, because we're sharing this globe. We need to bring down like carbon emissions. We need to stop eating animals. We need to stop doing all of this stuff. We need to educate. We need to let people see why. We need to let people see why their diet is killing them. Not only killing their body, it's killing the planet. It's killing animals. It's doing all of this stuff. We need to start with things like that. We need to again just not lose our mind so much. So again, this Jupiter. By the way, I see there's a lot of conversations going on, and that's cool. I don't know what they're about, so I'm just doing this. So yeah, I appreciate people having discussions and whatnot. But again, I'm talking about a whole range of things now. This Jupiter Saturn, again, this is a great reset, not just a normal conjunction of every 20 years, but a once in an 800-year alignment in the classical sense of the planetary war, of the Graha Yuddha. And in the best way I could visualize this, Jupiter is, as much as you might say who is the winner, who is the loser, in most systems, Jupiter would be the winner just because his magnitude, just because he's brighter, which means when you look up and these two planets get so close that their rays blur together, we're going to be seeing more of Jupiter because his magnitude is brighter. He's just brighter. So that's Jupiterian. It's hopeful. Now, again, it's Jupiter in Capricorn, but Saturn is there. So it's where we're at right now is this hope for the future, this hopefulness that things are getting reset in a way where, the last few years we've seen a side of life. We've seen a darkness and a just a stress and worry and fear for the last several years. And we're moving past it. We have to move past it now to the next thing. It is a reset. And moving past a lot of toxic habits, culture, that are culturally embedded. This last year in 2020, we also had so much of this, around race. In the midst of the COVID, we had the thing with George Floyd. It wasn't just an American phenomenon, it was a global phenomenon. Realizing that we have to come together here. We can't just be brute force wins. Money wins. How much can I take? That wins. It ain't going to survive. And so we have opportunity here and a necessity to reset on some level. And we have to do it skillfully. And that's what we're trying to navigate. And nature is going to take care of a lot of it, like it did last year with COVID. If we didn't choose it, nature said, okay, everybody go home and rethink this. By the way, really good news. I had an article that it said something like 30%. They're like, I think it was for Thanksgiving. Companies like Tofurkey and non-meat options for Thanksgiving, those companies had like I think it was something like a 300% increase in demand. Like they couldn't keep up with the demand. Many of these non-meat, vegan, vegetarian companies, again, Thanksgiving is one of the most gluttonous, hedonistic days of the year, where it's ham and turkey and turducken, turkey, ham, duck. And these companies said that they had that they couldn't keep up with demand. And these are plant-based, vegan meat alternatives. To the person, they said, yeah, it seems like COVID really made a difference with a lot of people investigating and evaluating their approach to consuming animals, to consuming meat products. I said from the very beginning that this was one of the most important things that COVID was going to show us. And people were going to get more educated about food choices, particularly, vegetarian, vegan, eating closer to the earth, eating more local, and learning how to do this better. And so we're on the upswing. We're on the upswing. We have to get back to, breathing and if you're spiritual, be spiritual. Connect with truth and guru and wisdom. That's the necessity now with Jupiter, Saturn in Capricorn. Jupiter wins the planetary war in this sense. So guru is there and he's saying, okay, this is a hope. This is the hopeful future. Yes, it's hard. We're going to have to concentrate and, work hard to get through it. But on the other side, Jupiter goes into Aquarius by the spring of next year. I think we're in for a much better 2021 than we imagine, especially if people take what's happening with COVID now seriously. This is not a joke. This is not a hoax. This is not something where you're strong and macho. I'm getting out and drinking my beer or whatever it is that you think, healthcare workers are now going, oh my God, this is worse. Again, we have better treatments now. So perhaps the death rate is lower than it was when it first started because we didn't have any treatments. So you see the cases, and the percentage of cases aren't as high as the ratio to death because we have better treatments now. And we're going to be getting a vaccine. For those who want to get the vaccine, it's going to be very helpful, particularly for people who don't want to change their lifestyle. These things are coming, but we have a few months, again, right now, between now and like April, as Jupiter is going through Capricorn with Saturn. This is no joke. And we could see a big financial correction. We can't just keep floating capital as if it's candy corn or something. So there could be some intense corrections coming financially in the global financial market. And we need a reset in this regard. Something needs to happen where we need to figure out, okay, all this debt was artificial anyway. So on some level, we need to come up with a global solution to recalibrate all this currency. This is what I think we could very easily see, because otherwise we're going to have 15 countries completely bankrupt and not being able to do anything with each other. None of their currencies are going to be worth anything. And no one wants that to happen. China doesn't want it to happen. No one wants it to happen because then no one has any money to do anything. So these are the kinds of things that I think we need to have happen at some point as a starter. And again, as much as people are focused on all kinds of things with politics and all kinds of things, again, that's a big distraction. The U.S. election has happened. I'm not even going to get into that. I haven't even mentioned it because I'm tired of talking about it. But we got things where these things are coming forward, and we need to move forward globally together to deal with serious issues that are coming up, that are being neglected, and this is a big part of it right now. And so again, we can see the similarities to 1266. Again, the Magna Carta, which at the time was a revolutionary document that proposed a system of the people people being governed, people governing themselves within a parliamentary system of laws and edicts and a social contract. Now it's the next level. It's not just social within a country, it's within the world, within the globe, where there's equality, where there's not, because this also existed at a time where there was slavery everywhere and we were doing horrible things to each other. A lot of that still takes place. Exploitation, we don't have to have Genghis Khan physically, with an army invading other countries to also see the predatory predators or, dictators operate in different ways. It's not just armies, it's governments, it's financial dictatorship, it's capitalism gone apeshit, excuse my language, but nobody should have as much money as Jeff Bezos. That's capitalism gone crazy, especially when, again, or we need to rein in the out of control capitalism. And it used to be, even it really changed in the US in 1980. I'm not going to get into a political economics lesson, but before 1980 and Reagan and Reaganomics and wealth distribution was much more fair. There was still plenty of millionaires and billionaires and people rewarding, ingenuity and all. But since then, and especially in the last 20 years, it's gone crazy. You cannot have systems that are this unequal. You simply cannot. Again, these are the new kind of Genghis Khans. This is why the Bill Gateses and the Bezoses and these people, the Walmart, Walton families, and these oligarchs at the top of the world, they're the new kind of like Genghis Khans. I'm not saying it's because they're savages. They're exploiting a system that lets them exploit it. And you'd probably do the same thing if you could. So these things are what we need to be putting into place as we go forward. We need to be realistic about this stuff and not just beg for their mercy. Oh, please, Bill Gates, finance our World Health Organizations. And Jeff Bezos, please give your workers a living wage. These things need to be enacted into law with sobriety, with open-mindedness, and not couched in all of this demagoguery. Someone like Elizabeth Warren, who proposed a simple wealth tax on people who make over $10 billion, is like considered to be, a communist. This is incredible. This is insane. So we need to be sober about these things around the world and start giving people a chance. Otherwise, we are going to see civil wars. And it's not going to be because Republicans and Democrats. It's because too many people are struggling for nothing. And they need to wake up. Anyway, so this is the whole thing that we're looking at. We need to stop being exploited by politicians and their propaganda and start looking at these politicians and these words and these systems and getting educated about these things. Because one of the biggest problems is people are also not educated. They don't even understand the way the government works, the way elections work, the way the monetary system works. They're just believing in politicians and their propaganda. And of course, the politicians know it, and they just keep taking more for themselves and less for us, whether it's an R or a D in front of the name. So hopefully we can have a bloodless revolution, but a revolution is happening. And the people need to learn and come together and not be divided by the labels and by the spin, because now it's nothing but spin and people don't know what's happening underneath it all. I'm not going to get so into politics here, but This is a larger, but there are ramifications and opportunities here. So anyway, I will just make one more pass at getting this. If you want to really learn more about the Jupiter and Capricorn cycle, again, I have this free class that you can get. You could go to jupiterincapricorn.info, and it's a free class. Again, you can just click. I just put the link in the comments. You could click yes, reserve my space there. I'll reserve my seat now, and you'll see you can either watch a replay or you can make an appointment to dedicate a time to it. You can either watch instant replay or find a time. So I hope this was helpful for you to hear. I hope this was enjoyable and that I made some sense about the about this conjunction. And again, this planetary war, one of the reasons why, again, someone said, why does Jupiter win the planetary war? One of the reasons I'm saying here is because one of the main principles of the one who wins the planetary war is the brightest planet. And that, especially in this traditional kind of planetary war, this is the authentic planetary war where they're not only in the same degree of ecliptic longitude, but they're also at the same place of ecliptic latitude, where they're literally at the same point in the sky, not just advancing along the ecliptic, but within the same point of latitude as well. That's the real intent of planetary war. And because this one really fulfills that actual intent of planetary war, the one with the highest magnitude, or the brightest one, which is Jupiter, would be the winner. So when you look up at that time, on that day, you will see that Jupiter is brighter, or it'll look like one big planet. And so in that case, the winner is going to be the brightest. So I think we have more of a Jupiter opportunity here. And again, I know I spoke about some things that are controversial and said some things like people, lunatics and whatnot. I'm sorry. I can't help. No, I'm saying with all due respect, in that, stop losing your mind and getting triggered and getting ungrounded in paranoia, okay? We're all trying to figure out what's going on. We're all trying to do our best. If you do actual research into things and not just believing a paranoid video or something like that, you will realize that there's nothing that's so new that's happening. All of these things that seem to be, well, Bill Gates did this, and then this, and then there's this, and then there's this, so blah, blah. These kinds of things are hurting everyone's cause. And again, what I said, there's always going to be a fringe of that, but what I've said and what I've noticed that's been disappointing is even the holistic voices, or the voices that can make a difference, are now so much mixed with that kind of conspiratorial extreme that it dismisses the cause. Even, again, those who need to be voices of reason and of scholarship are now so far to the so mixed and running a parallel course with the conspiratorial ethos that it makes those voices dismissible. So that the people who we need to listen will be like, can easily dismiss it through and say, oh yeah, well, those are the same people who think Bill Gates is a lizard person and eating babies. So that's what that's all about. And people be like, yeah, okay. Everybody, take a breath, calm down. We need to work through this with sobriety, with resolve, with maturity, with patience. And it's already working itself out. Like I said, there's already been an uptick in people that are eating healthier, having a more humane relationship with nature, with animals. COVID has brought that into the forefront as our monetary systems and unsustainable industries are getting revealed as well. We don't need to get on airplanes as much. We don't need to be on cruise ships. We don't need to be doing so much with fossil fuels and whatnot. We don't need to be doing it as much. Rethinking these things and sensing opportunities. And yes, there's going to be capitalism that's going to be part of it because people sense where they can make money at it. Okay, that's part of it. We have to have a monetary system moving forward and incentivized by the future technologies, cleaner technologies related to preserving the earth, working together cooperatively around these things. That's the mindset of the Great Reset we're talking about now. There's no reason to just look at it as if, oh God, here it goes, globalists, microchipping, AI, drones, zombies. Come on, man, chill out. We've had resets every time there's a technological advance. It's always happened. So we'll leave it at that. And I hope you have a good day.